Operation Epic Fury. We destroyed over 50 Iranian warships. We erased their coastal radar chains. We collapsed their air defense network from 2 oceans simultaneously. 2 carrier strike groups hold 2 choke points surrounding the Islamic Republic, Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb. A third is crossing the Atlantic as we speak. The tightest naval siege since the Second World War, and it is still tightening. And yet, there is one thing the United States Navy has not done. We have not escorted a single oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz. Sit with that for a moment. The most powerful naval force in the history of human civilization, 11 carrier strike groups, 300 warships, the Aegis combat system, Tomahawk cruise missiles, 5th-generation stealth fighters. And we will not send a convoy through a waterway 21 nautical miles wide. More than 100 supertankers sit anchored outside the strait right now, engines cold, crews waiting. The price of Brent crude has climbed from $70 a barrel to north of $100. War risk insurance premiums are running $250,000 per transit. The global economy is hemorrhaging, and the Navy that just shattered the Iranian military is sitting in open water watching. Why? Not because we lack the firepower, not because we lack the will. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not a test of strength, it is a test of mathematics. And the mathematics say, very clearly, do not enter. Subscribe to Navy Decoded, because the people who serve deserve an audience that understands the mission. Type proud in the comments. To understand the math, you first have to understand the map and the trap that was built inside it. Unfold the map. Look at the Strait of Hormuz. 21 nautical miles at the narrowest point. That sounds wide. It is not. Because commercial shipping does not use 21 nautical miles. Commercial shipping uses the traffic separation scheme. 2 designated lanes, each 2 nautical miles wide, separated by a 2 nautical mile buffer zone. 6 nautical miles of usable corridor. Total. Now put a ship in that corridor. A very large crude carrier, a supertanker, stretches over 1,100 feet from bow to stern. Beam, 200 feet. Draft, 72 feet below the waterline. You are not sailing a vessel through an ocean. You are threading a building through a hallway. And the hallway has walls on both sides. One of them belongs to Iran. This hallway carries 20% of the world's crude oil, 20 million barrels per day. It also carries nearly 20% of global liquefied natural gas and a third of global fertilizer trade. Block this hallway and you do not just disrupt an oil market, you disrupt the supply chains that keep civilization running. Hormuz is not an oil choke point. Hormuz is a civilizational choke point, and right now, it is closed. Over 100 tankers sit anchored outside the strait. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps announced the closure and promised to engage any vessel that attempts transit. Brent crude has surged past $100 a barrel. War risk insurance premiums have spiked to $250,000 per voyage, costs so extreme that most shipping companies have simply stopped trying. The strait is not blocked by a chain across the water. It is blocked by math. The math of risk exceeds the math of profit. Commerce stops itself. So the obvious question, we just destroyed the Iranian Navy. We have EEG's destroyers, carrier air wings, Tomahawk missiles. Why not simply escort the tankers through? Because the people asking that question have not studied the map carefully enough, and they have not studied the enemy carefully enough. Here is what most analysts underestimate. Iran did not build this defense blindly. For 40 years, they dissected every American naval operation in these waters. Operation Earnest Will in 1987, Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, decades of Fifth Fleet presence in Bahrain, Operation Prosperity Guardian just last year. They watched, they learned, and they reverse-engineered a layered defense specifically designed to exploit the one variable we cannot change, the geometry of this strait. The corridor is narrow, the water is confined, and Iran turned every disadvantage of that geography into a weapon. The trap has 3 layers. Each one exploits a different dimension, and together they create a problem that no amount of firepower can brute force through. 10 days of sustained air and naval strikes have shattered most of that architecture. Over 50 Iranian warships destroyed or rendered combat ineffective. Roughly 300 missile launchers eliminated. 200 air defense systems gone dark. The surface fleet no longer exists as a coherent fighting force. And yet, the strait is still closed. Because the question is not how much we destroyed, the question is how much survived. And in the mathematics of Escort, where one weapon striking one tanker erases all the victories before it, the answer is brutal. 90% destruction is not enough. Escort requires 100% certainty, and the gap between 90 and 100 is where this equation breaks. Look at what is left. This is the layer that air power cannot solve, because the damage is already done. Iran began laying mines before the first bombs fell. United States intelligence confirms dozens are already in the water. Contact mines, moored mines, bottom influence mines scattered across the shipping lanes. Iran possesses an inventory estimated between 2,000 and 6,000 weapons. We destroyed 16 mine-laying vessels and struck storage facilities. That slowed the rate of new mines entering the water. It did not remove the mines already there. You cannot bomb a mine out of the water. You must find it, in murky, current-driven water along 360 square nautical miles of seabed, classify it, and neutralize it, one at a time. The Avenger-class mine countermeasures fleet has been almost entirely decommissioned. 4 ships remain, forward deployed in Japan, 4,000 nautical miles away. Experts estimate fully clearing the strait could take several months. Remember the math from 1988. The USS Samuel B. Roberts struck a single Iranian contact mine during Operation Earnest Will. Cost of the mine? $1,500. It blew a hole the size of a car through the hull, broke the keel, flooded 2 compartments with 2,000 long tons of seawater. Repair cost? $89.5 million. A weapon cheaper than a used motorcycle nearly sank a warship. Now imagine that mine under a supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil. The math gets worse. Mines hold the floor, and the floor cannot be cleared by firepower alone. That is layer 1. Now look up. We destroyed roughly 90% of Iran's missile launch capability. 300 launchers eliminated. That is an extraordinary achievement, the kind of suppression campaign that would end most conventional conflicts. But Hormuz is not a conventional conflict. It is a corridor. And in a corridor, one surviving launcher is enough. Iran's coastline along the strait is the Zagros mountain range dropping into the sea. Ridgelines, valleys, caves, tunnels. For 40 years, the IRGC pre-positioned mobile transporter erector launchers throughout this terrain. A TEL can hide inside a tunnel, drive to a pre-surveyed firing point, launch, and relocate in minutes. We eliminated the ones we could find. The question is whether we found them all. Consider what one surviving launcher can do. A Noor cruise missile flies at 5 to 7 feet above the waterline in terminal phase, accelerating past the speed of sound. A Khalij Fars ballistic missile descends from above the atmosphere at more than Mach 3. From the Iranian coast to the shipping lane, flight time compresses to seconds. A supertanker has no defensive systems, no chaff, no aegis, 1,100 feet of undefended steel. One missile, one hit. 2 million barrels of crude oil burning in the narrowest shipping lane on Earth. We eliminated 90%, but Escort runs on certainty, not percentages. The 10% we did not destroy includes the launchers we could not find, hidden in mountains, moved at night. One surviving launcher, one missile. That is all the equation needs. No guaranteed safety, no clear corridor. That is layer 2. Missiles own the ceiling, or what remains of it, but the trap has one more dimension. The Iranian surface fleet is functionally destroyed. Both Muj-class frigates, gone. The Alvan-class Sabalan, gone. The Makran forward base ship, inoperable. The drone carrier Shahid Bagheri struck and believed sunk. Over 50 vessels eliminated. The conventional Navy no longer exists as an organized fighting force. But the IRGC Navy was never a conventional Navy. Its core capability was always the fast attack craft. Small boats, under 50 feet, capable of 50 knots, armed with short-range missiles and torpedoes, launched from fishing harbors and island coves that number in the hundreds along the strait. These boats are difficult to detect from the air and nearly impossible to eliminate comprehensively from standoff range. Analysts estimate the IRGC retains the majority of its small boat fleet, 80 to 90% of vessels that were never designed to be found by carrier-based aircraft. They are too small, too dispersed, too numerous. Behind the fast boats, over 20 Ghadir-class midget submarines, small enough to hide in shallow coastal waters, quiet enough to evade passive sonar, armed with torpedoes and capable of laying additional mines. We destroyed one. The rest dispersed into coves and harbors along the strait before the first strikes landed. And alongside them, explosive unmanned surface vessels, kamikaze drone boats that have already struck at least 2 tankers since the strait closed. They do not need to survive. They need to arrive. The swarm is diminished. It is not gone. And in a 6 nautical mile corridor, even a diminished swarm poses a threat that no escort commander can dismiss. Stack what remains. Mines below, months from being cleared. Surviving launchers above, impossible to certify at zero. Remnant fast boats and drones on the flanks. The trap is degraded, but most is not all. We destroyed 90%. The remaining 10% is enough to make Escort a bet no engineer would take. Now, I can hear the objection. We have 2 carrier strike groups in theater, a third on the way, thousands of sorties flown, over 3,000 targets hit. Why not just finish the job and escort the tankers through? Because the 3 remaining problems do not respond to more bombs. The mines are already on the seafloor. You cannot bomb them out. You must sweep them, with ships we do not have in theater, through a process that takes months. The mobile launchers hide in mountain terrain that has been fortified for decades, and no commander can guarantee that 0 TELs survived. And the cost of being wrong is catastrophic. 1 mine under an Arleigh Burke means $2 billion in damage and a war that just doubled in scope. 1 missile into a tanker means 2 million barrels of crude oil burning in the world's most critical shipping lane. The expected cost of failure outweighs the expected gain of success. An engineer does not take that bet. So what is the strategy? Here is where the geometry flips, and this is the insight that most commentary misses. We do not need to enter Hormuz. We never did. Look at the map again. USS Abraham Lincoln, Carrier Strike Group 3, holds position in the Gulf of Oman, east of the strait. The Lincoln does not need to push through the choke point. From its current position, its air wing controls the eastern approach. Nothing enters or exits the Persian Gulf without passing through the Lincoln's surveillance and strike envelope. Now consider what that means for Iran. The mines that closed the strait to tankers also closed it to Iranian exports. Iran exports roughly 1.4 million barrels of oil per day, and nearly all of it must pass through Hormuz to reach any paying customer. The strait is sealed from both sides. Commercial tankers will not enter because of mines and residual missile threat. Iranian tankers cannot exit because of carrier strike groups and complete air supremacy. Iran built a trap to keep us out. The trap worked. But the trap is not one-directional. The same mines, the same missiles, the same geometry that prevents American escort also prevents Iranian commerce. Iran is suffocating inside its own fortress. Revenue, collapsing. Fuel reserves, finite. The ability to sustain military operations without export income, measured in weeks, not months. The carriers do not need to enter the hallway. The carriers sit at the door and wait. Time is on our side. Every day the strait stays closed, Iran bleeds economically while our carrier strike groups rotate fresh supplies from logistics chains that span 2 oceans. We have the endurance of nuclear propulsion and global supply networks. Iran has the endurance of a sanctioned economy with its only export corridor sealed shut by its own hand. That is not a stalemate. That is a siege. And the besieged party locked itself inside. If this breakdown changed how you see the Navy, if you now look at a map and see math instead of borders, subscribe to Navy Decoded and share this with someone who respects the service. So, why does the most powerful Navy on Earth refuse to escort tankers through a 21 nautical mile strait? Because Hormuz is not a test of strength. It is a test of mathematics. And every engineer in this audience already knows, you do not solve an equation by running head first into the wall. You walk around it. Iran spent 40 years building a trap at the front door. We hit it with everything we had, destroyed 90%. And the remaining 10% is still enough to close the corridor, because in a 6 nautical mile hallway, 10% is not a rounding error. 10% is a burning supertanker. But here is what Iran miscalculated. The trap was designed for a navy that needed to enter the strait. We do not. In our previous breakdown, we showed you how carrier strike groups positioned at Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, and Suez created a geometric siege around the Islamic Republic. Now you understand the final piece of that geometry. Lincoln holds position east of Hormuz not because it cannot enter, but because it does not need to. The door is locked from the outside, and Iran cannot ship a single barrel of oil through the door it sealed shut with its own mines. Iran laid a $1,500 trap at the front door. We did not open the front door. We locked it from the outside. And now the trap imprisons the trapper. That is not firepower. That is geometry. That is patience. That is engineering.